To order, will the clerk please read the statement?
This is a meeting of the Township Council for Monday, June 11, 2018. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public and the press on January 5, 2018, and was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Please rise to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I need to do roll call. Roll call.
Councilmember Ooms?
Here.
Councilmember Kadish?
Here.
Councilmember Van Tassel?
Here.
Councilmember Allberger?
Here.
Council President Murphy?
Here. May I have a motion to open for public comment?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anyone from the public that would like to step forward? You have 3 minutes to address agenda items only. Seeing no one, may I have a motion to close to public?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? First up, we have items for discussion. The property maintenance ordinance, I just wanted everyone to be aware that we will be receiving a draft copy with some revisions from the original ordinance that was out to the council back in 2015. Marlin Towns is in discussion with our zoning officer and with administration on coming up with some to try to streamline it a little bit more so it's not so cumbersome. If you notice in the one from back then, other departments are involved in this. So the building department, so whether it's the fire marshal. So like I said, administration just needs to get some of the other departments in line so everybody sees what's coming down the pike.
So this that was in our packet. We were going to vote on, but you changed it to discussion item?
What was in our packet was what was distributed, okay? It's not in our packet.
Well,
Okay. So the discussion item is that this was the original one from 2015 that was never acted on. There was a work session. Nothing was ever acted on. So it's being taken and revised, and administration is going through it with some of the department heads also.
so do you want any comments on this, or wait till...
You could, but it might be best. We'll probably get a draft copy, I think maybe sometime this week.
If you'd like, Sandy, you can send the comments to me, and we can incorporate them into the draft revisions that we're making.
So we're not discussing it?
Well, if you I'm just saying is if you have any discussions, you
So
can certainly.
everybody can hear it.
Yeah, you can have.
And you can take notes and maybe... So what I see, a few things in this, is the verbiage and how it's written. On the definitions here.
Page.
We had defined premise as, let me find the definition. I think it was premise here.
A lot, plot, or
I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't define empty lots really well in here. I'm just trying to find, premise, a lot, a plot, or parcel of land, including any structures thereon. But then when you read the document, they always include, when you're talking about premise, with the building on it. So I don't know if you want to address, I think, addressing empty lots and then lots with structures on it to define it more clear.
Yeah, there are some that just have foundations.
But then if you have a lot, some of this is you can't have weeds higher than 10, what was it, 10 inches? Is that what it was? So if you have an empty lot, you're going to have weeds that are over 10 inches. So just some things to think about. Defining lot versus premise.
That should be easy to do.
Under deterioration, what's included is and/or the uncorrected consequences of a natural catastrophe. It's my opinion that should be taken out. And I think that's a special situation where perhaps more leniency should be given, maybe a different ordinance for natural disasters.
So remove natural disasters and natural catastrophes from the definition of deterioration,
Right.
and make a new definition for a deterioration caused by a natural disaster. All right.
Under abandoned wells, I'm not sure what our code is for that. I know of abandoned wells that have not been taken care of
Okay.
in 20 or 30 years. So I'm not sure what recorded as a public nuisance at common law means, since I'm not an attorney.
I'm not either.
So that's under
That's a new one.
public nuisance A. I think that should be rephrased. I understand the rationale under F, but I think there are times during construction that perhaps there should be a clause that allows for an extension of a permit. I can understand buildings that have been robbed of their plumbing for the copper, and yes, that if it's a residence that's being used, it must be repaired. But I think there are occasions where an empty building perhaps falls in that category, but should not be punished necessarily by the owner.
Well, Dan, to your point on F as well, we have lake homes that possibly disconnect some of their utilities during the season. So I don't think that should be considered
So
was
seasonal
under-
exemptions.
a nuisance.
The other thing that struck me is that, in my opinion, agricultural barns and agricultural lands should have no bearing on this. Should be an exempt situation, and the County Board of Agriculture is usually the supervising entity. So there should be some mention about agricultural
Okay.
and the right to farm.
Wasn't that one of the things we were doing? This was all for residential, and we need to expand into some of the commercial.
Well,
So,
agriculture is commercial.
but with the stipulation of agriculture being exempt, if the property is being farmed.
You could have a farm that looks pretty an eyesore.
Weeds taller than
Yes.
10 inches.
Is there any other discussion? No? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Resolution 18167, resolution authorizing purchase of 2018 Ford Escape through Morris County Cooperative Pricing Council Contract 15-C through Route 23 Auto Mall. This authorizes the purchase of a vehicle for the tax assessor's office. Resolution 18168, corrective action plan for the 2017 audit. This acknowledges the township plans in regards to the audit. Resolution 18169, renewal of liquor licenses in the Township of Vernon for the 2018-19 licensing term. This permit the renewal of eligible liquor licenses. Resolution 18170, approving a charitable solicitation permit for the Vernon Township Fire Department. This permits solicitation on June 30th on Route 94 in Church Street. May I have a motion to adopt resolutions 18167 through 18170?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Owens?
Yes.
Councilmember Kadesh?
Yes.
Councilmember Van Tassel?
Yes.
Councilmember Alberger?
Abstain on 170, yes to the rest.
Council President?
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt resolution 18167 to 170 with extension noted.
Next, we have first reading of ordinances. Ordinance 18-21, an ordinance of the Township of Vernon, County of Sussex, State of New Jersey, authorizing the sale of property owned by the township and not required for public purposes, and more commonly known as Herald Square, 114 Route 94, Block 232, Lot 12. This ordinance permits the auction to be held on or about July 9th, 2018. Is there any discussion on this item? Because I know that Councilmember Kadesh.
Yeah,
Question two.
I'm very opposed to this for several reasons. And I've mentioned this to a couple of people. The county the county tax list has "do not sell" at the top in red. And the reason, I assume, is that it was held in abeyance for, in case we needed to expand the current facility at the recharge area. I assume that it was a restrictive covenant set by the county to ensure no encroachment on the recharge facility and to reserve additional land use in case of expansion in the future. When we look at it today, yeah, there's no need for expansion in the future, considering our current situation. But things could recover, and let's say that a passenger train came into Vernon. At that point, we have a great need for expansion, I'm sure. It was told to me by an attorney that the reason that land was kind of kept in reserve is that it's a very unique site, and there's no other place in Vernon in which a recharge area could be installed other than those two sites. So to me, that's a very important aspect. The engineering drawings that go with the deeds on this have a notation that on the drawing that no entry will be approved to Route 517 unless the vertical curve is removed from the site. That's likely not to happen. Having that kind of restriction from the county, who would have to approve that, seems to me that it's not valuable for anything that was on the original drawings at Community Park. So basically, for those four reasons, I'm really opposed to selling this property.
Councilmember Holmes, you have.
No, I can. Oh, that's the same thing.
I would like to recommend that
can I
we get a recommendation from the county.
Did you have any? Did you have any comments?
I would ask the mayor, did you research to see if there was anything like Green Acre funds used on this site or anything of that nature?
We've been researching this for several months now. When you go back to 08, 04, the ordinance is talking about the McAfee redevelopment. They talk about this area. As stated in the ordinance, a clear goal of the plan, McAfee, is to create employment opportunities and increase property values by attracting the necessary capital investments to the area. Long-term goal is property tax stability for all of the township's taxpayers. I also saw do not sell. We cannot find any legal reason or why that was put there. I spoke to John Hesselis today, and he said no, there are no restrictions that he knows of other than there's a concern about blasting taking place that could affect the soil layers for discharge. And I was aware of that report by French and Perello engineering report that was done in 2006, found blasting on a parcel could result in potential damage to structures and soil densifications. So the blasting would have to be limited, and if we auction this off, that has to be known. Now, when you go back to the SCUMA minutes about where to put the recharge, those minutes say there were other places to put this recharge. This property was the subject of one of a few properties, the subject of the 2009 forensic audit report. The first appraisal came in at $440,000. The second one, done almost a year later, came at about $1.2 million. And that's why you see such a high tax. But we paid $1.2 million and $50,000 extra dollars that no one can explain why we paid the extra money. Now, some of the parties have had 4 entities interested in this. 2 of them own businesses surrounding, is attached to this parcel. So they want it for storage. The one business, and I don't want to give their business plans away, they would have access anyway. And with the access that's been talked about, because I know what you're saying about 517, but you can actually go 94 behind the Liberty gas station into that. And then you have the far other side, too, where there's some businesses and houses. So we have 4 businesses interested. My concern is to get some money into the general fund, but to put it back on the tax rolls. When I said to Azalis today, do you need that land for expansion? He says, no, you need it for development and EDUs, if we can get anything there. You also could take water from that recharge center if someone needed it for irrigation. So they could use that water, and they said that would be a no-win, that would be a win-win situation for anybody who got into an agricultural position there, to take water from there and use that to irrigate. It would lessen the cost from Suez for them. So John, and I trust John, he's a very capable engineer. He's been great dealing with this whole sewer issue with us. Took a lot of time with me today and explained that he knows no reason why we shouldn't sell this property.
Can you just let everyone know who he works
He's
for?
the SCUMA engineer,
How come this didn't go with the Max Ban auction?
because we were still researching it. And I wanted to hold it separately from it because I knew there was other issues, and I didn't want to hold up the Max Span auction when I anticipated problems with this, all the way back to the 2009 audit, because frankly, we should have never paid what we paid. And it even went down to the Attorney General's office for review. I mean, how do you explain in less than a year, property value goes up $600,000?
Characters who signed the deeds.
And we did search the deeds too, and we could find no restrictions also on any kind of deeds. But the blasting is of concern, and any buyer, we would let them know, any blasting has to have the authority in the review of the county not to disrupt those beds. But the 4 businesses I've spoken to, they anticipate no blasting.
And then what I did is I actually reached out to somebody that was actually involved in it back then, nobody from SCUMA, and I asked the same, what's your recollection of why this happened? And they laughed when I said, could it be possible expansion? And their answer was, well, that's never happening. But they also mentioned blasting, making sure that if there, the pipes that are, the laterals that are in the ground at SCUMA, and they said, not to disturb any of that. They also said, if SCUMA wanted it, they could also put a bid in for it. But to their recollection, that was put on there for the town to be cautious. But this ordinance that the clerk passed out to us on page 3 actually lists properties. This is the ordinance. I think you just referenced the ordinance.
Under
That 08?
0804,
Well, I haven't had an opportunity to look at it.
No, but on page 3, you'll see the list of properties that it covers. And close to the bottom is 232, lot 12, which is this property. And then when you read the information, it says the remainder of the property is mostly vacant and underutilized. The commercial properties within the redevelopment area are typical of the commercial uses in Vernon Township, generally geared towards recreational uses. Leaving these areas vacant and underutilized would be a disservice to the community. But it's showing, basically lists all the properties that are surrounding that.
Isn't this property now currently known as 12.02?
I thought it was 12 and 9.
Thank you.
And I might add, we gave 7
it's
acres
12.
over to the county. I think it was for $1, so
It shows 32 acres. Right?
30-something acres now. I think it was
32
43,
acres.
42 originally.
Showing
They needed the 7 acres for the recharge beds.
Yes, it's lot 12.
Lot 12, not 12.02.
What's the assessment on that property?
It's over $1 million because that's what we paid.
Well, what do you think realistic?
We would have to get it appraised or whatever, or we just go, actually, we're not using any, we could just, we've been doing 10%. But the question to the council is, do you want to get that back on the tax rolls? Or do we let it just sit there?
All agreeing we just move forward with redoing the McAfee development plan that we had set in limbo and pushed for. I think we need to do it.
It's part of the redevelopment.
What I found fascinating in reading all those deeds is it's filled with historical Vernon names all the way through. That's actually a fascinating group of deeds.
Is there any other discussion? May I have a, may I have a motion to introduce ordinance 1821 with a public hearing on June 25th, 2018?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Kadesh?
No.
Councilmember Van Tassel?
Yes.
Councilmember Wahlberger?
Yes.
Council President Murphy?
Yes.
Motion carries to introduce ordinance 1821 for public hearing on June 25th, 2018.
Next, we have the public hearing for the second reading of ordinances. Ordinance 1818, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Vernon, County of Sussex, State of New Jersey, authorizing special assessment for the restoration and repair of Barry Lakes Dam 2. At the request of the association, this authorizes the assessment of the Barry Lakes Dam. May I have a motion to open to the public hearing for ordinance 1818?
Motion.
I
Second.
have a motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this ordinance? Please step forward. Seeing no one, may I have a motion to close to public?
Motion.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to adopt ordinance 1818?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Kadesh?
Yes.
Councilmember Van Tassel?
Yes.
Councilmember Wahlberger?
Yes.
President Murphy?
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt ordinance 18.
Ordinance 1819, ordinance amending the salary ordinance for non-union employees. This establishes the salary ranges for the various non-union employees. It does not establish salaries. May I have a motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 1819?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anyone from the public that would like to step forward, make a comment on ordinance 1819? Seeing no one, may I have a motion to close to public?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to adopt ordinance 1819?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Holmes?
No.
Councilmember Kadesh?
Yes.
Councilmember Van Tassel?
Yes.
Councilmember Wahlberger?
Yes.
Council President Murphy?
Yes.
Motion carries to adopt ordinance 1819.
Public comments, they're limited to 3 minutes on any topic. May I have a motion to open to public?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anyone from the public that would like to step forward to make any comments?
Sally Rinker Vernon.
Good evening.
At the last meeting, I and other property owners from High Ridge came to appeal to this administration our concern for the filling of soil without permits or oversight. We know this is happening in other locations in town as well. It is the situation in High Ridge that caused me to more thoroughly review the Soil Fill Placement Ordinance 18-15 that you approved on April 9th. This ordinance, in my opinion, needs to be revisited. The ordinance allows 100 cubic yards of soil to be placed without permits. That is 5 to 6 tandem dump truck loads. That may be okay, but with no oversight, a person could dump it in the wetlands or leave it unstable without any oversight. This ordinance separates a minor soil fill permit, less than 500 cubic yards, from a major soil fill permit greater than 500 cubic yards. The person responsible to issue the minor permit is the township zoning officer. What has come to light, as per the discussion at the last meeting, is the zoning officer is making the call if a permit will be a minor or a major. The major permit, 500 cubic yards or greater, is handled by the Land Use Board with full attention by our township engineer. It is my opinion that the engineer needs to be the one who determines the course of action and the type of permit. The situations must be reviewed by a higher level of expertise, first for the correct determination and process. And no disrespect to our zoning officer, but I do believe that the issues that exist on these sites definitely come under the purview of a higher level of expertise, such as an engineer. So, for instance, I question the determination of the level of permit in the High Ridge incident, when now, after the fill was placed, the permit is being considered as a minor. There are issues there that may not be addressed as under the requirements of a minor fill permit, and that causes concern for us. The one sure way to determine how much fill is placed is to have a prior conditions topographical map, followed by a final grade topographical map when the work is complete. Without our engineer involved at the outset of any soil placement, other issues arise. In particular, in High Ridge, soil placed 3 weeks ago is graded to the rear of the property, thus creating an unstable, uncompacted 10 to 12-foot wall. And I'm talking on like a 12-on-1 pitch, okay? We in construction need to final grade things on a 3-to-1 so it can be stabilized and seeded with grass. This is never going to happen the way this has been left, okay? This 10 to 12-foot wall is looming over the adjacent property. Silt fencing should have been required at the very least, regardless of a stop work order. This wall of soil is adjacent to the septic system of an adjacent property, and it's also near wetlands. The county requires a permit for any disturbance over 5,000 square feet, so that would be a 50 by 100 surface area, which isn't very much really when you consider what goes on in these soil fill placement locations. So our soil placement ordinance should reference the county. So to not insinuate, if our ordinance is followed, that no other permits are required, because that's quite the contrary. The township cannot replace county requirements. So I ask this council to revisit this ordinance, as there are flaws, and that's okay. You know, it was rolled out and we needed to have something in place, but now that situations have come to light, you know, we're able to fine-tune it perhaps so we can cover the bases a little better. That would be my opinion. If it was created to protect the environment and adjacent neighbors, it must reflect that. In closing, I want to say, if anyone has issue with my sounding the alarm and informing my neighbors about this issue, I would do it again just the same. As I now know, this will not happen again in our neighborhood due to something simply called knowledge. I own 2 homes in High Ridge. One is 2 doors away from this location that we're speaking of tonight. Mr. Van Tassel, you seemed very sympathetic to this issue at the last meeting. I would ask that you please insist that press releases to the public be done so we can put a stop to this happening in our town. Let's stop it at the receiving end. Maybe that'll help with some of the problems. And lastly, I, along with others in High Ridge, would ask that an independent soil analysis be done on the site in High Ridge so we can put our concerns to rest. Okay? Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public?
I have photographs I'd like to do.
If you could give them to the clerk. If you could give them to the clerk,
I'd like
please.
to give it to Mr. Van Tassel.
Please pass them to the clerk. Is there anyone else from the public that has any comments?
Hi, Jim Lancelotti. I live in the same neighborhood as Sally and some other people here. I just basically want to confirm what she said with respect to the amount of dirt that was dumped on that property and the way that it was left. I was on the adjoining property and I saw the same 10 to 12 foot mound. It's basically a direct slope. It's not compacted. I don't have to tell you that there was a dump truck spill, and we're aware of where at least one of those loads of dirt originated, and I would echo the same sentiments. Our neighborhood is concerned about the quality of that dirt, and we would ask that there be some type of testing to ensure that that fill is clean fill. We're all property owners, we all pay taxes, and we're all concerned about our property values being minimized if there's an issue with that site. So I wanted to affirm what Sally Rinker had said with respect to the amount of dirt and the condition of the fill and the way that it was done. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to make any comments? Seeing no one, may I have a motion to close?
Motion.
May I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Before we go further, and since we are talking about the soil ordinance, I went through the ordinance as well, and there's a lot of inconsistencies in there, and I do believe it needs to be readdressed. Part of making a decision is the evaluation process, so now we've got a chance with a real-time experience of how this ordinance reads, and I think we should reevaluate it because there is some inconsistencies in there. There's nothing in there about anybody putting up a wall, retaining wall. When you read it, it says a minor and a major are going to be done by the engineer, and it has to conform to, they decide, I forget the verbiage here, I got it on my, anyway, I would like us to talk about it. You know, they say the engineer is going to calculate the soil for a major and a minor and take several factors in effect, like the contour of the land and the topography for a major and a minor, but you don't have to submit that information when you're doing a minor. So how can the engineer take that into consideration when they're not even going to get that information? So that's lacking from the ordinance. Also, the same thing, I looked at the soil erosion and the soil ordinances from the county, and I think ours is, I think, not as restrictive as the county. When you wrote this, Mr. Zelinski, did you notice anything from the county?
We actually prepared a very restrictive ordinance that was, we prepared it. The first draft, if you recall, was extremely restrictive, and there was some pushback that it did not need to be so restrictive being a first draft. We had significant comments from the engineer to, not make the ordinance as restrictive. If we'd like it to be, if the council would like it to be more restrictive, we can certainly do that.
One of the things that really came into play were the local contractors, and there was much discussion right here about soil coming in from out of town. So that was one of the main factors in this. Is, when you have a septic company that lives and works in town, moving dirt because of a septic, they're actually filing this information when they file for their permit, but they should not be restricted because they would be moving possibly a lot of dirt. Things like that were exempt from it, moving mulch, moving salt, because we did have, our engineer spoke to a few of the contractors in town, because you do not want to stop someone from being able to build new construction. But there was emphasis put on soil coming in from out of town. The reason that we put this ordinance, now, actually I could say Vernon Township has put this ordinance into effect based on what was going on in town. So, like I said, the engineer was fully on board with going through everything.
Right,
And-
we had that big discussion, but now we're finding that it may need to be revisited because there is some areas, especially in the verbiage, and some other areas.
As with a lot of things, but also what has to be taken into
I
consideration
understand
is
what you're
keeping,
saying.
we also cannot keep businesses from doing
I understand.
business in
So
town. But like I
maybe we
said,
have to look at maybe only using certified places. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can look at this
well,
and maybe accommodate everybody, but I think we should look at it
the
again.
problem that's happened is sometimes it's, regardless of whether people are breaking the law, whether they're speeding or doing anything else in town, it's there, you cannot stop everybody. Everybody's.
But we
so
could take measures to prevent this from happening to anybody else
that's
again.
why we did what we
So,
did to begin with.
I know, but
So
I'm just reevaluating this, and that's a
I know.
smart thing to do when you make a decision.
No,
is
this-
when you see loopholes, address them. And I would like to make a motion to revisit this again.
well, I don't know
I
that.
also asked that we reserve the right to test soil, and that was not put in the ordinance.
I'm not sure, Mr.
that was my
Zelinski, if you'd like
suggestion,
to.
and- You
I think the best suggestion would be for, if any council members have comments with respect to the ordinance as it's currently being implemented and enforced in town, to provide those comments to us. We'll circulate a amended version and a draft for the council's discussion and further comment on it.
So you'll draft another one as per
Sure, I mean,
recommendations?
yeah, absolutely.
But it will have to go through the engineer, it'll have to go through the zoning department, It will have,
Maybe we should have a discussion on it first, so we know what to put in this draft.
Well, we've
Does
had-
Anybody else have issues with the ordinance?
we've actually, we've had a lot of discussion. That's what I'm saying, is just like,
I
you don't
understand
have to
that.
get so defensive.
Does anybody else have any issues about it that you would like to suggest and have an
revisit
open
it.
discussion?
There's
I think
nothing,
it should be easier to test the soil.
The-
Really, I think. We should have the option.
That's something that we might be able to pass on to the homeowner.
Owner or the
concerns.
town. I mean, we can't, I understand we don't want to spend money, but this is an important issue. We're so environmentally conscious up here, and we're supposed to be nature. We don't want to now not follow our own culture.
we are, but then again, we will have the increased cost of the engineering, which this administration has come under severe attack.
But it says in the ordinance that the engineer will do both. of
Right, I'm
those.
talking about further. I'm just making a comment.
So anyway, how do you
But like
wanna
I said,
have a
the reason that-
discussion, or you want to, I think a discussion would be best.
Well, you can have a discussion, but really it would be advisable if you could submit comments, because what happens is as the attorney's reviewing it, it needs to also go to the engineer. We've had the engineer
How
here.
about a work session?
But what, can I just, if you submit some of these items to the engineer, now if we have a work session or a discussion right here at the meeting, because we can have discussions, now everybody has that information instead of taking it, going back again, making phone calls.
But there's such a value to having a discussion, because I might get something you're saying to me and I can feed off of that, or somebody might bring something up and I can feed off of that. It's very valuable to have discussion. Writing back and forth, there's no value to that other than you just give your opinion. Discussion is very important.
That's not what I'm saying. What I said
We're
is,
bulking on, let's have a discussion before we start writing up drafts.
that's not,
We'll be doing it over and over. What's the problem? No one wants to discuss it.
that's not what, no one, has anyone said no one wants to discuss it?
The discussion.
No one
before
has
we
said
do
that.
this.
We are doing that right now.
Can we,
But the whole point is, when there are issues, we need to, it's not just the engineer. It's the zoning department, and it's also a lot of other factors. So it's not just, you cannot leave out people.
Council
or-
President? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we pass our ideas on right now, and then we will schedule, I know there's a discussion where we'll have notice so the contractors can come back to see if there's any problems for them and the engineer, and just try to address and tweak it?
And that's what I'm suggesting. So, again, so if members of the council could pass on, they've given some recommendations now. If you have any other recommendations, if you could pass them on to the attorney. And then what we'll do in the future is we'll schedule something, whether it be at a council meeting, before a council meeting, or on a separate day. So, next, we'll move on to the mayor's report.
Thank you. I received an update from Mrs. LaRocca, our zoning officer, on the new soils ordinance. 2 applications have been submitted. One is for 29 Fieldstone. The other, I submitted the application and the geotechnical engineering report on the soils. Also, Sussex County Soil Conservation has determined that there was more than 5,000 square feet of disturbance and is requesting a permit be obtained. Our engineer will review it. At One Indian Trail, this homeowner has hired an engineer and is working on getting the paperwork together for a permit. Summonses have been issued for alleged violations of Ordinance 18-15, 6 at 3 Silver Spruce. Telephone conference is scheduled tomorrow with the DEP, the state, federal, and county officials regarding the dumping issues we currently now face. Zoning officers LaRocca and Mike Burns continue their efforts for compliance of Ordinance 18-15. Chief Mills reports a substantial decrease in the reports of dumping. I sent an email to the DEP 2 weeks ago and attached a letter regarding 3 Silver Spruce Drive sent by the New Jersey DEP on January 14, 2015 to Joe Wallace, owner of said property. I inquired if Mr. Wallace fulfilled requirements set forth by the DEP, and if not, what actions did the DEP take to ensure compliance. The response I received was, Mayor, I followed up with our enforcement program regarding your inquiry about the letter you attached. That letter was a warning notice. Such a notice has no legal weight and are issued in instances where there is not a violation. Otherwise, a normal notice of violation would be issued. However, the purpose of such letters is to have the responsible entity understand the potential for a violation. After the letter was issued, Mr. Wallace provided the DEP with analytical data as requested. The DEP reviewed the data and determined that there were no exceedances of the direct contact soil remediation standards. Additionally, based on a visual assessment, the material was not considered solid waste. Therefore, the incident was closed. A meeting, as I said, with all levels of government is planned for tomorrow. My concern is who has jurisdiction, what laws or regulations can be enforced, and what procedures need to be followed to obtain core samples for testing. Should analysis show potential hazards, what actions need to be taken by who and sources of funding. Then we have to follow a complete debriefing needs to be undertaken to prevent this situation from occurring again, including legislation as this present municipal government has done. More teeth is required, including at the state level. To elevate current allegations to the minimum status, and this would come at the state level, second-degree crime, depending on culpability, that can be enforced by municipal police departments or other enforcement agencies. Such a legislation would lead to the presumption of prison time if found guilty. Those delivering contaminated soil to an unauthorized site should be exposed to incarceration as well as monetary penalties. Then civil penalties should be legislated for seizure of bank accounts, properties, and equipment used in the commission of illegal landfills. The demand is continually being made to effect an arrest because of this situation. My response is, for what 2C charge can the municipal police effect an arrest? Because I see none. We are not a regulatory commission or agency. Also, we are requested to stop trucks that are carrying the dirt. To make a stop, reasonable suspicion is required for a violation of Title 39 motor vehicle or 2C the criminal codes. Probable cause is required for arrest or charges. Our zoning officer has administered 10 summonses. There's 4 additional not related to our ordinance, our new ordinance, over the last 2 weeks for violations of our new ordinance and the miscellaneous ordinance alleged violations. Arrests are unlawful for zoning violations. Testing the soil may require a warrant. This is at this present time unless you put more teeth into the current ordinance. Based on probable cause, however, the open field doctrine may suffice as the pile is outside the curtilage of a structure. Right to privacy arguments, Fourth Amendment, will result. A warrant cannot be based on reasonable suspicion but probable cause that hazardous materials are buried there. We need facts, not assumptions. We also are frustrated, the administration, and I know this council is. We play by the rules and must weigh every action we take before we take it. Although it would cost several $1,000s, I believe we, as a township, should seek an injunction or a TRO to prevent any further dumping by Mr. Wallace. It will cost up to $5,000, and then we have to see where it goes, but I think it's money wisely spent. We spent the money to combat gypsy moths. We need to spend the money now to combat contamination of our water sources and any other materials that may be dumped there if they make their way through. And it might not be today, it could be 20 years from now. And we see this like in Mahwah where the Ford plant was, et cetera. So I think this would be money well spent to get an injunction. On other matters, Vernon Day, I received only positive feedback on Vernon Day. Congressman Gottheimer sends his great appreciation to Michelle, the PAL, and all Vernon Day volunteers and municipal employees for a well-planned, dynamic town event. The Trails of Vernon Challenge officially kicked off on June 2nd in celebration of National Trails Day and goes on until October 20th. That's 20 weeks to meet your goals. People set goals and then they meet them by walking our trails. This is a highly successful program created and administered by our Community and Recreation Director, Michelle Downton. I met today with Greener by Design, different trail organizations, and a business interest regarding future plans for the AT Trail at Route 94. Our principal concern is for safety. Hazardous conditions result from the large number of visitors at this location. Additional meetings with the DEP and DOT will be scheduled in the near future to decide where can we put all this parking. Speed limit there is 45, but people drive what a design roadway will allow, and we know the speeds are in excess of 45 miles an hour. Someone where they're parking, they're on blind curbs, and I really fear it's just a matter of time before someone's going to be injured or killed on Route 94. And some of the pictures we looked at during the fall festivities, there's hundreds of cars parked on both sides of the road. So we need to take action, and we're moving to get the DEP and DOT with all the other trail conservancies to work together. Let's solve this problem. Another matter that I'm getting more and more complaints about is short-term rentals, Airbnbs or similar. I'm receiving complaints regarding Airbnbs or similar short-term rentals throughout the township. Regulations are required. Prohibiting short-term rentals will be difficult to enforce. The Jersey City ordinance regarding short-term rentals shows promise. A similar ordinance will generate revenue and the township authority to regulate and prohibit the behaviors that disrupt neighborhoods' peace and quiet. The ordinance needs to address the following. Residents would be permitted to rent their homes for less than 30 days. Application fee and permits are required. An agreement with short-term rental companies such as Airbnb will charge 6% hotel occupancy tax and collect the hotel tax on their rentals in the township. The company will also reimburse property owners for up to $1 million in damage caused by renters. The ordinance will prohibit homeowners and renters from changing the character of the neighborhood. The ordinance will cap the number of properties one user could rent, say, to 3 on a platform. Regulate the number of guests, motor vehicles, and prohibit problematic and illegal actions. Failure to submit an application or obtain a permit will result in summonses leading to a fine if convicted. Qualified private communities such as Highland Lakes will present its own challenges. We have to ask private communities. We're going to have to get them involved in this discussion. Zoning issues will be explored to prohibit in certain zones. So we'll control it by zones. This is only the beginning as we continue our investigation and due diligence, but it's something I just want to bring up so members of this council can start contemplating seeing this, what we can do to generate revenue, to enforce our ordinances, because we are getting a lot more ordinances trying to clean up the town. You need to expand the zoning officers. Plus, it could be revenue. I see it in other communities where they are generating revenue to fill not only to fulfill the investigations, make sure nobody's violating them, but also can put money towards other things that you want in the budget. And I bring this up as just a topic to start thinking about, to discuss, to research. But that's some of the research that I've done. I just stayed in an Airbnb in Colorado. There's many of them, but they collect a tax on it. They're immaculate. So there would have to be enforcement on it, but it's happening anyway right now. We're getting the complaints, and you could limit it, like where we were in Steamboat, it's limited to one person to 200 square feet, 12 at the max. I would say I would cut that down to 8. Parking facilities, only 2 additional cars outside the garage, so you don't want 4 or 5 cars. I mean, what's happening, some of these Airbnbs, I've told the people, you got to call the police because we can't regulate them right now. We have no ordinance on the book. Towns like Paramus, they've totally prohibited Airbnbs, but they're not a vacation resort community. We are. So again, it needs more exploration, it needs more discussion, it needs investigation by all of us to see where we want to go with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to council comments.
I got some questions for the mayor. What happened to the Wisteria contract? I see
That
they
is
have a
still
sign there for
waiting
sale.
on
They
them
have
to
a
remove the soil.
Big for sale sign on it.
Well, that sign's misplaced. That's for the 88 or whatever acres.
Oh, that's
the horse
not for
track.
that one.
Nothing to do with Wisteria.
So wasn't the finish date May 31st? Now you have to do another addendum?
We may have to. They're slow in moving it. Unless you wanted me just to tell them, because you're the Open Space Committee, that you have no more interest.
I think one of the problems was the weather when they were.
Weather could be, but it hasn't been removed. So, I look for the Open Space Committee, which is this council. If you want me to tell them we're not interested, I will do so. If you want to extend it, I will do that. But I leave it up to the council as the
So
Open
you're
Space.
saying it's them that are the slowdown?
Yeah,
not
they have
the
to
town?
remove the soil. That's contaminated with arsenic and mercury. And they're looking at estimates as high as $28,000, and I don't feel the taxpayer should pay for it. We'll pay for the soil testing out of open space to make sure it's safe so we can continue. I would like to proceed with it, but if the council feels otherwise, I will follow your suggestion.
Is there anything else?
Yes. Could you put the Environmental Commission minutes on the town website?
I don't think there'll be a problem doing that.
The last that are on there, I think, are 17 or 16.
Okay.
That's-
We'll follow through with that tomorrow.
Bring that up to current.
Question. I have a question.
I think anything that has a budget should be on there.
I have no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Did we inquire with either the state DEP or the county hazmat team to get a copy of the soil analysis from the truck that overturned?
I haven't received it yet. I don't know if the police, I can tell you when you bring something to the state lab, the labs, based on, it could have changed since I was a police officer and I was always submitting drugs and stuff.
I know it's going to take time. I just wanted to make sure we were.
Oh, I'm
asking for
anxious
it.
to see what's in that soil, just like we all are, and I'm sure everybody that's sitting in this chamber is interested. But as far as I know, it is not returned yet.
Wheels of government.
Do you know if, tomorrow in court, do you know if any of the, I want to say individuals that were involved in the moving of soil are due in court?
I didn't check the court docket.
Okay.
I don't know when.
I just didn't know if you had heard anything. All right. Council comments, Councilmember Ohms?
No comment.
Councilmember Kadish?
The Vernon Day was very well attended. Gottheimer was here for close to an hour. Went to all the tables. Freeholders Rose and Lazaro were also here. Candidates Don Fantasia and Hertzberg, Courier, and Katkowski were also in attendance. It was quite a nice day. I attended on Friday a conference in Patterson for the the New Jersey Historic Preservation Commission. It was very informative. I also had a sit down with Dorothy Cuzzo, which I think was informative. And the Historic Preservation Commission has a project for an Eagle Scout. Cameron Ventura is designing a phone app for the Glenwood Historic area, and he's also organizing the design and installation for the sign that will be there. And I explained to him, in all likelihood, you don't have to install that. The DPW will be happy to do that. He said, but that's part of the project. Very energetic kid. Really enjoy his interest and enthusiasm.
Thank you. Councilmember? No comment. Just wanted to mention that posted on the township website, Route 515. There's some minor construction going on with a bridge on Route 515. So anybody commuting in and out could experience. It seems like it's not what's going on at Route 94, but just so residents are aware that there is something. It's between Ridgewood North at the top of the hill and Mud Pond Road. Other than that, I have nothing else. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.